Welcome to this explainer. You know, it's so easy to take the cash sitting in your wallet right now completely for granted. But the evolution of that money, it is a wild story. We're talking massive technological breakthroughs, huge government power grabs, and honestly, some spectacular financial disasters. Back in the 19th century, the writer Goethe actually imagined a demon tempting an emperor to invent paper money just to pay off state debts. And sure, it worked in the short run, but it ultimately led to massive inflation and total ruin. And as we're going to see today, that story, well, it's a lot more history than fiction. Imagine being the famous Venetian merchant Marco Polo, arriving at the court of Kublai Khan in the 13th century. He was absolutely stunned by what he saw. He literally wrote that the great Khan possessed the secret of alchemists. I mean, think about it from a Westerner's perspective back then. Taking the bark of a mulberry tree and just declaring it to be as valuable as pure gold or silver? That was an absolutely mind-blowing concept. No way, right? But as we'll see, this monetary alchemy is an incredibly powerful technology, and it's one that has consistently tempted governments straight into financial ruin. So here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll cover the 3 rules of money. Then we'll look at the birth of metal coins, followed by China's epic paper currency experiment. After that, we'll check out colonial America's take on paper money, and finally wrap up with the modern shift to pure fiat money. All right, Section 1, the 3 rules of money. Before we jump into the history, we need to lay down 3 crucial ground rules. Number 1, money is never static. It's a technology, and it's constantly evolving, from shells to heavy metal to paper, and now to electronic digits on a screen. Number 2, the best, most efficient technology inevitably wins out. There's a very good reason we aren't lugging around heavy bags of metal anymore. And number 3, and honestly, this is the big one to remember, a strong central government will almost always swoop in to appropriate and control any private financial innovations. Basically, any private money out there is ultimately going to be vulnerable to a government's interference. Keep that in the back of your mind.
Moving right along to Section 2, the birth of metal coins.
Okay, so early societies faced a massive headache when it came to trade, barter. The 19th century monetary theorist William Stanley Jevons came up with a great term for this. He called it the double coincidence of wants. Think about it like this. If you have a herd of cows and you really want some wheat, you have to go out and find someone who not only has wheat, but specifically wants your cows. It's incredibly inefficient, right? Well, this huge problem was elegantly solved way back in the 7th century BC. The Lydians, over in what's now Western Turkey, invented standardized metallic coinage using electrum, which is this natural mix of gold and silver. It was a literal game changer for human trade. But of course, the exact second standardized money was invented, the war against counterfeiters kicked off. It's a tale as old as time. In 1696, Sir Isaac Newton, yes, that Isaac Newton, actually invented those little milled ridges you still feel on the edges of coins today. Why? To stop people from secretly clipping off tiny bits of silver. And fast forward centuries later to 2017, the UK Royal Mint had to introduce a highly complex 12-sided pound coin just to fend off modern counterfeiters. So the technology has always been in a relentless arms race to protect currency. But here is an incredibly dark truth for you. The biggest threat to the value of money? It actually wasn't those shady counterfeiters in the streets, nope. It was the monarchs sitting right there on the throne. Governments consistently debase their own currencies to pay off massive debts or fund their wars. Just look at these numbers. France reduced the silver content of its coins by a whopping 57% back in 1303. And King Henry VIII over in England? He slashed it by half, 50%, in 1551. They were just quietly stealing the value right out of the citizens' pockets. So if you're sitting there thinking that physical commodities like gold and silver are completely safe from inflation, well, think again. Thanks to this relentless coin debasement by the emperors, Rome experienced a staggering 19,900% cumulative inflation between the years 151 and 301 AD. 19,900%. It just goes to show that whenever a government is under severe financial stress, they will find a way to quietly chip away at the value of your money. Which brings us to Section 3, China's paper currency experiment. Now, unlike Europe, which was passing around highly valuable gold and silver, early China was actually using base metals like copper, lead, and iron for their coins. Because these metals had such a remarkably low value-to-weight ratio, trying to transport enough cash for a large purchase was a total nightmare. To fix this, some really brilliant local merchants came up with an idea: lightweight, private paper proxy notes. It was pure genius. But remember our third rule of money from earlier. The central government saw this, prohibited the private operators, swooped right in, and took total control. And just like that, they created the world's first official paper money, which they nicknamed flying money. This whole system really hit its peak under the Mongol regime. In 1260, Genghis Khan's grandson, Kublai Khan, issued a brand new national currency made entirely of silver notes. And to make sure absolutely everyone used his new paper, he aggressively banned the use of actual gold and silver in 1262. The penalty if you disobeyed? Literally death. That's one way to enforce adoption, right? By the late 1270s, they stopped letting you convert the paper back into metal at all. It had become pure fiat money, backed by absolutely nothing but the Khan's violent authority. And predictably enough, the entire system completely self-destructed. The temptation to just fire up the printing presses and finance the government's massive spending was way too strong to resist. Note issuance skyrocketed from 12 million in 1265 to almost 120 billion by 1330. That is an astronomical jump. The result was rampant, devastating hyperinflation. By 1356, that Mongol paper currency was essentially just worthless junk. The empire learned the hard way that the money printer is a very, very dangerous addiction.
All right, let's cross the Atlantic for Section 4, Colonial America's Paper Money.
So early American colonists were incredibly cash poor. They didn't have British sterling, they didn't have local gold mines, so they had to rely on commodities like tobacco, wampum shells, and foreign Spanish coins. Seeing a desperate need for a better system, a brilliant 23-year-old kid named Benjamin Franklin stepped up to the plate in 1729. He wrote this really intuitive defense of paper currency, and he actually went on to become a highly successful printer of early colony notes. Honestly, Franklin was acting almost like a prototype for the modern central banker. Now, Franklin's vision of an American paper currency was absolutely crucial, mainly because it successfully financed the colonists' military spending during the War of Independence. But it came at a completely devastating cost. The revolutionary government printed so much money to fund the war that inflation hit an astonishing 192% in the year 1779 alone. The continental currency completely collapsed. In fact, that's exactly where the old phrase, "not worth a continental," comes from. Once again, that vicious cycle of state-sponsored hyperinflation had struck. Finally, we arrive at the modern era in Section 5, the shift to pure fiat. The late 19th century was really this golden age of financial stability, mainly because currencies were firmly backed by physical gold. But everything changed when World War I erupted in 1914. Governments were suddenly facing these enormous military bills, so what did they do? They essentially hit pause on the gold standard so they could fire up their printing presses. And the crazy thing is, that core trust was never fully restored. Later on, the crushing deflation of the Great Depression forced countries to massively alter their gold pegs. Eventually, by 1973, the post-war Bretton Woods system shattered entirely. That 1930s devaluation is particularly revealing. To fight the immense, crushing pain of the Great Depression, the United States drastically devalued the dollar. Overnight, they literally just changed the official price of gold from $20.67 an ounce all the way up to $35. By doing this, they effectively drove up everyday prices on purpose. It was a deliberate strategy to reduce unsustainable debt burdens across the country and try to boost employment. But it really shows you just how willing governments are to completely rewrite the rules of money whenever they need to survive a crisis. And that brings us exactly to where we are right now today, a system of pure fiat money. Under this regime, you can't take your cash down to the central bank and demand a physical chunk of gold or silver in return. Nope. The value of the money sitting in your bank account right now is backed by absolutely nothing except your faith in the government's authority and, of course, their ability to collect taxes. So the truly fascinating takeaway from all of this is that our current, highly complex modern financial system, it is not a permanent endpoint. From the ancient Lydians to Marco Polo's China to colonial America, and now to our global fiat standard, we have literally come full circle. We are living inside a cycle that we have been repeating for centuries, relying entirely on the state's self-control to prevent those printing presses from running too hot. And this leaves us with a massive, critical question to ponder. Right now, we're witnessing the rise of electronic digits and the early, totally chaotic cycles of digital and cryptocurrencies. But we have to look back at our 3 rules. Remember, money always evolves, the best technology wins, and governments always appropriate the innovation. Keeping that centuries-long history of government control in mind, we have to ask ourselves, as the era of physical paper inevitably fades, what exactly comes next?